The newest Unearthed Arcana could change the way that archetypes are built in 5th edition from here on out. Let's get a closer look at the newest UA, the Mages of Strixhaven. Hello players and GMs, I am Reese, and welcome to another video by Jetpack7. Before we get started today, I just want to remind you all to please like, comment, subscribe, and to hit the notification bell. We are getting very close to 4,000 subscribers, so every single subscription really does make a huge difference. This week, I am reviewing the newest Unearthed Arcana, the Mages of Strixhaven. This is a very unusual UA. This is probably the weirdest one that I've really looked at so far, and could have some long-lasting, far-reaching implications on the future of 5th edition in general. For those unfamiliar with Strixhaven, it is another setting from Magic the Gathering. I don't know exactly what they'll be doing with this, what kind of book it's going to be printed in, but either way, if you, as a general description, you can look it up more, but as a general description, it is sort of Harry Potter-esque, where there are a bunch of like magic houses, but it's obviously Magic the Gathering, so it's a little bit darker and more adult themed, I suppose, than you'd expect from Harry Potter. So yeah, go look it up if you want more details. That said, for this Unearthed Arcana, the weird thing about it, I kind of just have to get into it to show you, but essentially they are creating new archetypes for multiple classes. So yeah, it's kind of difficult for me to get into it too much, but let's just go ahead and jump right in, and then I can talk a little bit more in detail with the document in front of me. All right, so here we have it. We've got a few names, a couple of them obviously very familiar, Dan Dillon, Jeremy Crawford, and then we also have Mackenzie De Armas. I don't know that name, so I apologize if they are a rather present writer in the community, but either way, I am a big fan of this. I looked over it before recording this video, and I like it a lot, but it is a big change up from what we're used to with the standard archetype building and writing style of the past of 5e. So there are a bunch of different colleges in Strixhaven, and the ones covered here are the Lorehold College, the Prismari College, Quandrix, Silverquill, and Witherbloom. So each of them kind of have their own thematics, once again, kind of like Harry Potter, but the Lorehold College is dedicated to the pursuit of history by conversing with ancient spirits and understanding the whims of time itself. The Prismari College is dedicated to the visual and performing arts and bolstered with the power of the elements. The Quandrix College is dedicated to the study and manipulation of nature's core mathematic principles. The Silverquill is dedicated to the magic of words, whether encouraging speeches that uplift allies or piercing wit that derides foes. And Witherbloom is dedicated to the alchemy of life and death and harnessing the devastating energies of both. So that's all the information I'm going to give about like the flavor of each college, because this is a pretty substantial UA, so I'm gonna focus more on the actual mechanics and the way that the archetypes are structured, but I will link the UA in the description if you want to get a more in-depth description of what these colleges are about and what kind of stuff that these casters can do. So now let's talk about the actual mechanics of choosing this subclass. So this is definitely different from any archetypes we've seen before. So when you choose a subclass for your character, a Bard's College, a Wizard's Arcane Tradition, etc., you can instead choose one of these subclass options so long as the subclass is compatible with your character's class. So what that means is instead of choosing an archetype that you would normally have for that class in the past, having been just specific for that class, now these archetypes can fit into multiple classes, and they have a list at the beginning of the archetype of which classes can actually play this archetype. So this is very different, and if they stick to this style, then it could prove to have some long-lasting implications on how archetypes are built. So getting into actually how these are described is a little odd, as you could imagine, because obviously not every caster archetype gets archetype features at the same level. So the way they have to do it is right here. All the subclass features detailed here have a level prerequisite as noted beneath their name, and you must meet the prerequisite to gain the feature. For example, to gain a feature noted as level 6+, your character must be 6th level or higher in the class for which the subclass was chosen. So if you're a wizard with the Mage of the Prismari subclass, you must be a 6th level wizard to gain the favored medium feature. So it's essentially just an easier way to say this is your first archetype feature, this is your second archetype feature, this is your third, etc., etc. This allows it to be more sweeping. You can kind of put it across all of the classes to which it applies. I'm not sure if they could just say this is your first, second, or third archetype feature, but I guess this kind of makes it more, I don't know, specific, or I'm not sure. But either way, this is the method that they went with, and as far as I know, it doesn't cause any weirdness, but it does allow you to gain multiple features at certain levels, whereas normally you would gain a class feature at one level and then not gain an archetype feature at that level. Occasionally it happens, but most of the time it's kind of 5th edition. They try to spread it between each of the levels so that you don't gain too much at a certain level. This method of archetype writing does kind of make that happen just by the nature of the kind of sweeping examples of it. I think they could bypass that by just saying this replaces your first subclass feature, this replaces your second subclass feature, that kind of stuff, because they do, on those leveling charts, they do say that this is, they do indicate the level of when you get that archetype feature. It doesn't say specifically what archetype it is, but either way, that might be a way around it, but this is the method they went with for now. So let's go ahead and start off with the Mage of Lorehold. So to start off, so the first thing you get for the Lorehold Mage is basically an additional spell list. This happens for a few of them. This one, you get the Cantrip Sacred Flame and the first level spell Comprehend Languages. And then as you progress in the class, or in the archetype, you get these spells as well. Knock, Locate Objects, Speak with Dead, Spirit Guardians, etc. I like the fact that they've started to include some Paladin spells in here as well. Destructive Wave is right here. There's another one that eventually gets Aura of Vitality. So they're kind of allowing these archetypes to dip into spell lists that you don't usually get to dip into. And then you get Ancient Companion. So this is the big one. And obviously this is a big paragraph of text, but essentially all this says is that you can get a little like statue companion that can help you in combat. You can use a bonus action to command it to take its actions. If you are incapacitated, it will be able to take actions on its own. It uses your proficiency bonus in several places throughout the stat block as well, and you can choose between 3 types of spirits to bond with. You can choose either the healer, the sage, or the warrior, and each of them kind of gives a specific benefit. Something cool that you can do with this companion is that as an action, you can actually expend spell slots to heal it, and it's 10 times the level of spell slot extended to heal it. So that's actually a pretty significant amount of HP. Obviously, that does get costly. Oh, I forgot to mention that to be a Lorehold Mage, you can be Bard, Warlock, or a Wizard. So this is any of those 3 classes can be this archetype. So obviously, if you're playing a Warlock, expending a spell slot to heal your companion is a little bit more costly, but it will heal a pretty significant amount. And then you can summon a new one at the end of a short or long rest. When they perish, they return to their plane of origin, blah, blah, blah. Here's the stat block for the Ancient Companion. They've got 14 AC. Normally, if you choose the Warrior, they'll pretty much add a shield, so it'll be 16 AC. They've got 5 HP plus 5 times your level in the class. I'm not exactly sure what the hit dice are for. Maybe they can restore HP at a short rest. I'm not entirely sure, but either way, they've got those hit dice. They are proficient in con saves, intelligence saves, and wisdom saves, adding your proficiency bonus to that. Skills are history, perception. It's pretty much a construct, so it's immune to poison, immune to charm, exhaustion, speaks your languages, proficiency bonus is yours. And this is where we start to get to some of the more specific actions that it can take, depending on whether you chose the healer, the sage, or the warrior. So it has Ancient Fortitude, which is essentially just undead fortitude, where if they get reduced to 0 HP, they can make a con save with a DC of 5 plus the damage taken and drop to 1 HP instead. If you chose the Sage, it also gives you a sort of like Paladin aura thing, or it kind of has a Paladin aura thing, where if you're standing within 15 feet of the companion, you and your allies gain a +2 bonus to intelligence and wisdom checks. Obviously not nearly as powerful as a Paladin aura, but it can make an attack, and this is all of them can make this attack, dealing a d8 +2 plus your proficiency bonus in force damage. So it's actually a pretty significant hit, because even early on, that's dealing a d8 +5 damage, essentially, with your 3 proficiency bonus. And then if you choose the healer, it can use this action called Healer's Light. The companion chooses a creature it can see within 15 feet of itself and flares with invigorating light. The creature gains 1d8 plus proficiency bonus temporary HP. So obviously it's not raw healing. So temporary HP obviously doesn't provide the same value as full healing, but you can give it to people when they're full health, kind of temporarily increasing their maximum HP for, however long that lasts. If you chose the warrior, they can do a reaction called Warrior's Protection. When a creature within 5 feet of the companion makes a strength or dex save, the companion imposes itself between the creature and the danger. The creature can roll a d4 and add the number rolled to the saving throw. So essentially, it can use its reaction to add a d4 to a saving throw of a nearby creature if it's strength and dex. Again, pretty niche. I think the strongest of those three is definitely the healer one, just because that's kind of the one that will always help. But because you can choose which spirit you bond with, I don't think it really matters that the other two aren't quite as strong, because obviously if you're out of combat and you need to, I don't know, if you're investigating something or making perception checks or whatever. So I can definitely see a situation where the sage and the warrior would also be helpful. But in terms of combat, I definitely think the healer would be the most beneficial to have on your side. The level 6+ feature is called Lessons of the Past. Through your studies, you learn how to better listen and take heart the teachings of history. When you bond with your ancient companion, you gain the following additional benefits depending on the type of spirit you chose. So this essentially just makes your companion even better at this next level. If you chose the healer, your hit point maximum increases by an amount equal to your level in the class, and you gain the same number of hit points. And when you regain HP from a spell, you regain an additional d8 hit points. So the healer essentially just gives you more health and makes you heal more when you are healed from a spell. If you choose the Sage Spirit, you have advantage on ability checks using the Arcana, History, Nature, and Religion skills. Additionally, once per turn, when you deal damage to a creature with a spell of first level or higher, you can deal an additional 1d8 force damage to that creature. So this one's kind of turning into the Mage Helper, as you'd probably expect. And then if you choose the Warrior, if you use your action to cast a cantrip, you can make one weapon attack as part of that action. If that weapon attack hits, the target takes an additional 1d8 radiant damage. This one's actually pretty powerful, depending on what type of what class you're playing. Obviously, if you're playing like a super squishy wizard with no strength or dexterity, then that's not going to be a particularly helpful thing. But depending on the class that you took and the kind of attribute distribution you chose, then that could be pretty potent. And the level 10+ feature is called War Echoes. By pulling from the magic of the past, you can cause your opponent's old wounds to resonate anew. Once per turn, when a creature you can see hits a target with an attack roll, you can use your reaction to force the target to make a wisdom saving throw against your spell save DC. On a failure, the target becomes vulnerable to one of the damage types dealt by this attack. This vulnerability lasts until the end of the target's next turn and affects the damage dealt by the triggering attack. And you can use this reaction a number of times equal to your proficiency bonus, regaining all uses when you finish a long rest. So this is very, very powerful if used in tandem with certain spells and abilities. So you can use your reaction to make a target vulnerable to not only one instance of damage, but every instance of that specific damage type until the end of their next turn. So let's say, your rogue runs up and sneak attacks a creature. You can make them vulnerable to piercing damage until the end of that creature's next turn. So they have an entire round of combat where they're going to be taking double piercing damage. God forbid you sneak a crit in there as well. So that's actually a very, very strong ability if paired correctly with, obviously there are a lot of spells that would work out that way too. Anything that deals a significant amount of damage of a single type would be really, really crazy. And the final one of the Lorehold feature, level 14+, through steeping yourself in the chaotic whims of history, you learn how to briefly channel the wild nature of time itself. As a bonus action, you can enter a state of chronal chaos. When you enter the state, and at the start of each of your subsequent turns while in the state, you gain one of the following benefits of your choice. You can choose luck. You receive brief flashes of the future, stealing yourself against oncoming assaults. Whenever you make a saving throw against an effect that deals damage, you can roll a d6 and add the number rolled to the total. Resistance. You rewind time, knitting together injuries as they occur. You have resistance to bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing damage. Swiftness. Time stutter, slowing others but hurtling yourself forward. Your movement speed increases by 15 feet and you do not provoke opportunity attacks. This benefit lasts until the start of your next turn. You cannot choose the same benefit 2 rounds in a row. The state lasts for only 1 minute and ends early if you're incapacitated, and you can only do it once between long rests unless you expend a spell slot of 4th level or higher to use it again. So that was a lot, but essentially you can enter a state as a bonus action, and then that turn and every subsequent turn you have to rotate between these 3. So you cannot use one of them 2 turns in a row. You have to be rotating between them each turn. You can just theoretically bounce between 2 of them if you favor either one, but you can't stick to the same one each turn, which I think is a really fun ability, especially because it doesn't really, take any resources away from you. So none of these buffs are massive. Obviously, getting resistance to bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing is really nice. Being able to move without provoking attacks of opportunity is really great, but it's not going to break the game by any means. None of these are hugely potent abilities. So being able to just bounce between them for a minute is, I think, a really, really fun ability, and I like it a lot. Next, let's move on to the Mages of the Prismari. This is for druids, sorcerers, and wizards. So no bard this time, or warlock. So the first thing you get is proficiency in 2 of the following skills: acrobatics, athletics, nature, or performance. Simple enough. And then we get kinetic artistry. This one is pretty fun. I like the imagery of this one a lot. This archetype kind of takes on a lot of elemental ideas to it. So you can dash as a bonus action, and when you take this bonus action, choose one of the following additional effects. Boreal Sweep. Icy water swirls around you. Until the end of your turn, you can move across the surface of water as if it were harmless, solid ground. Additionally, when you leave a space within 5 feet of a creature, you can force that creature to make a strength save against your spell save DC, and on a failed save, they are knocked prone. A creature can only be affected by water once each turn. So essentially, you can run on water for until the end of your turn after using this bonus action, and if you leave a space within 5 feet of a creature. So I guess if you get within melee range of a creature and then leave that space, you can make them make a strength save or fall prone, which is pretty cool little imagery. Scorching Whirl. Flames wreath your steps. Once before the end of your turn, you can force each creature within 5 feet of you to make a dex save against your spell save DC. On a failure, they take fire damage equal to 1d4 plus your spellcasting modifier. Pretty straightforward. You can deal damage to creatures around you. Thunderlight Jaunt. You take on a nimble lightning form. Until the end of your turn, you can move through the space of other creatures, and you do not provoke opportunity attacks. If you end your turn inside a creature's space, you are pushed into the nearest unoccupied space. So this one essentially just makes you be able to move without provoking opportunity attacks and moving into the space of other creatures. And you can use this bonus action. You can use any of these. The bonus action dash a number of times equal to your proficiency bonus, regaining all expended uses when you finish a long rest. So you can't just do this infinitely. You can't just dash as a bonus action every single turn. But when you do, you can get kind of a bonus effect associated with it, which is pretty fun. None of these are super duper strong, but I really like the way they interact because I haven't really seen many mechanics like this before. There aren't that many movement oriented mechanics that actually affect other creatures, which I enjoy. Favored Medium. This is the level 6+ feature. You have honed your forms of elemental expression to best suit your ideas. Choose one of the following damage types: cold, fire, or lightning. You gain resistance to that damage type. Additionally, when you cast a spell using a spell slot that deals that chosen damage type, you emit a spectacular aura of artistry, which extends 5 feet from you in every direction, but not through total cover, and lasts until the end of your next turn. While the aura is active, each creature of your choice has resistance to your chosen damage type, while within the aura as you shape your favorite elemental medium around them. You can change your choice of damage type whenever you finish a long rest. So basically every day you can choose a damage type and gain resistance to that damage type, and then whenever you cast a spell that deals that damage type, any creature within 5 feet of you gains resistance to that damage, which is a fun little interaction. 5 feet is pretty small. I think maybe 10 feet would be a little bit more reasonable, just because I rarely find myself standing right next to another creature, another ally, unless I'm in a really tight space. So maybe something could bump that up, but either way, I like the thematic nature of that for sure. Focused expression. Honing your talents, you skillfully infuse your emotions with even more potent expressions of elemental might. Once per turn, when you deal damage to at least one target, you gain an additional effect determined by the damage type chosen for your favored medium feature. So that is this last feature. So whichever one you choose at a long rest, that is what determines what effect takes on for this spell, or for this feature rather. If you choose cold, one of the targets of your choice takes an additional d6 cold damage and must make a con save against your spell save DC. On a failed save, the target's speed is reduced by 10 feet until the end of its next turn as ice mires it. A target can be affected by ice only once per round. If you choose fire, one of your targets of your choice takes an additional 1d6 fire damage. Fortifying flames then dance around one creature of your choice within 30 feet of you. The chosen creature gains 1d6 temp HP. And lightning, one of the targets of your choice takes an additional d6 lightning damage and must make a dex save against your spell save DC. On a failed save, the target is unable to take reactions until the end of its next turn, as residual lightning shocks its form. So each of these kind of give, obviously cold and lightning are more about disabling opponents, whereas fire is about supporting your allies with, an additional d6 temp HP. Again, nothing super potent here, nothing really particularly huge. That said, the fact that this just happens, it doesn't take any additional action economy or anything like that. This is just a buff anytime you deal damage to at least one target. You can do this with that. It doesn't even have to be that you deal this specific damage type. It's just whatever type you chose at the top of that day. So you can cast a fire spell and apply the cold effects, from what I'm gathering from this. So anytime you deal damage to at least one creature, they gain this. You can apply this effect. And the last feature, level 14 plus, is called Impeccable Physicality. Your relentless dedication and training have instilled an outstanding sense of precision and grace in your art. You gain proficiency in dex saves if you don't have it already. Additionally, when you make a dex save, you can treat a d20 roll of 9 or lower as a 10. Always love that. Dex saves are one of the most common saves in D&D. I think maybe second only to wisdom saves. Dex saves are very, very important to be able to pass, and being able to, one, gain proficiency in it, and at this point your proficiency bonus is 5, so gaining proficiency in dex saves and then not being able to roll lower than a 10 is obviously very, very nice. Next up is the Mage of Quandrix. This is specifically for sorcerer and wizard subclasses. The first feature you get, you gain the guidance cantrip and the first level spell Guiding Bolt. And you also gain some spells as well. Enlarge, Reduce, Spike Growth. This is the one that gains Aura, Vitality, Haste. I really like these spells. Control Water, Freedom of Movement, Circle of Power, and Pass Wall. These are some very powerful spells that this one gets. In particular, Aura, Vitality, Freedom of Movement, Circle of Power. Those are all really, really powerful. Circle of Power is a paladin only spell generally, and this is one that it's a 5th level spell, so they would be getting it much, much later into the game, whereas with this archetype, from a full caster class of either wizard or sorcerer, you can get it at 9th level, which is very, very nice. The other feature you get right away is called Functions of Probability. By iterating on the mathematical patterns of reality, you can nudge chance to tilt around a creature. When you cast a spell using a spell slot that targets at least one creature, you can choose that creature or another creature within 30 feet of it, including yourself, and add one of the following effects. So basically, anytime you cast a spell that targets a creature, you can choose one of these effects. The chosen creature must succeed on a wisdom save against your spell save, or the creature must roll a d6 and subtract the number rolled from the next attack roll it makes before the start of your next turn. And then supplemental function, which is basically the opposite. Once before the start of your next turn, the chosen creature can roll a d6 and add the number rolled to an attack roll or saving throw of its choice. The creature can roll the d6 after rolling the d20, but must decide before any effects of the roll occur. So this is essentially a bard's version, or like this archetype's version of cutting words and inspiration. You can either take away from the attack roll of an enemy creature or add to the attack or saving throw of one of your allies. That's essentially it. Obviously a very powerful addition. The D6 isn't a huge die size, but it is still something nonetheless and can make the difference. It can be the difference between passing or failing a saving throw. 6+ feature, Velocity Shift. You learn to manipulate kinetic formulas and alter the velocity of another creature. When a creature you can see starts its turn or moves to a space within 30 feet of you, you can use your reaction to force the creature to make a charisma save against your spell save DC, which it can choose to fail. On a failure, the creature is teleported to an unoccupied space of your choice that you can see within 30 feet of you. You can use this reaction a number of times equal to your proficiency bonus, regaining all uses at a long rest. So essentially, when a creature starts its turn or moves to a space within 30 feet of you, you can teleport it somewhere. If it's an enemy creature, they have to make a saving throw. If it's an allied creature, they can just allow you to do that. So this is really nice. I like the use of this. I like you being able to use this as a reaction quite a bit, because positioning within a combat is really important, especially if someone is in danger. So you can actually just like save your ally, especially if, if your healer is caught in the middle of a bunch of enemies, you can just pop them out of that just by moving within 30 feet of them. Just move them 60 feet away from the people that they're surrounded by. The 10+ feature is called Null Equation. Through careful calculations, you beset your enemies with abstract equations that reduce their might. Once per turn, I like this imagery because it sounds like you're just attacking them with math, which I don't really understand how that works. But either way, you're besetting them with abstract equations. Once per turn, immediately after dealing damage to a creature, you can force the creature to make a con save against your spell save DC. On a failure, the creature has disadvantage on strength and dex saves, and its weapon attacks deal only half damage. This lasts until the start of your next turn. You can do this a number of times equal to your proficiency bonus, regaining all uses at a long rest. So again, this is just another thing to kind of gimp an opponent. It lasts for an entire round, so they will not be able to do much damage during that turn. And obviously it's a con save, so a lot of big hard-hitting enemies will have pretty powerful con saves. That said, disadvantage on strength and dex saves, that is a much more powerful thing to me than having their weapon damage. And the final feature of this one is quantum tunneling. Your mathematical expertise extends to altering the foundational equations of your very being. You gain resistance to bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing damage. That's just permanent. So you just permanently gain resistance to bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing damage, and not from non-magical sources, just in general. Additionally, you can move through other creatures and objects as if they were difficult terrain, but you take a d10 force damage for every 5 feet you move while inside another creature or object. If you end your turn inside a creature or object, you are shunted into the nearest unoccupied space you last occupied. I don't love that feature, largely because I don't like being given a mechanic and then being discouraged from using that mechanic. Taking a d10 force damage for every 5 feet you move as a sorcerer or a wizard, that's a pretty significant amount of damage for, the squishiest casting classes in 5e. So I think I would prefer it to say that if you end your turn inside a creature or object, you take however much force damage. It can be higher than a d10, but either way, I don't think they should be punished for moving through creatures or objects, because in my case, that just means I would never use that unless I'm literally going to die if I don't. I don't really see any other benefit to doing that necessarily. And we've got the Mage of the Silverquill. These are the talkers. And for this one, it is Bard, Warlock, or Wizards that can choose this one. To start off, you get an Eloquent Apprentice, or you get the feature Eloquent Apprentice. You learn one cantrip of your choice, either Sacred Flame or Vicious Mockery. Doesn't count towards the number of cantrips you know. Additionally, you can gain proficiency in 2 of the following skills: Deception, Intimidation, Performance, Persuasion, or Insight. Also, at first level, you gain Silvery Barbs. You can invoke words laced with magic to demoralize your foes and turn their misfortune into a boon to bolster your allies. Immediately after a creature you can see within 60 feet of you succeeds on an attack roll, an ability check, or a saving throw, you can use your reaction to demoralize the creature. Unless the creature is immune to being charmed, it re-rolls the d20 and must use the lower roll. If the attack roll, ability check, or saving throw then fails, you can choose a different creature you can see within 60 feet of you. That creature is empowered and can re-roll one ability roll, attack roll, ability check, or saving throw it makes within 1 minute and use the higher result. A creature can be empowered by only one use of this feature at a time. Once they fail an attack roll, an ability check, or a saving throw because of a reroll forced by this feature, you can't use it again until you finish a long rest unless you expend a spell slot to use it again. Okay, so that one was a lot. Essentially, immediately after a creature you can see within 60 feet of you succeeds on an attack roll, ability check, or saving throw. So any creature you see within 60 feet of you that succeeds on a roll, essentially, you can use your reaction to try to make them re-roll that. And if they fail, then you can then bolster your allies. So you can essentially take their luck and give it to your allies, and then your allies can re-roll an attack roll, ability check, or saving throw. And then once you've successfully caused a creature to fail their roll because of this ability, that's when it counts as a use, and then you can't use it again until you finish a long rest. Alternatively, you can expend a spell slot to do this again. So this sounds more confusing as it is, but essentially you can just give a creature disadvantage on a roll, and then if they fail, you can give your ally advantage on a roll. That's basically all it comes down to. At 6th level, you gain Inky, or level 6+ rather, you gain Inky Shroud. You learn the Darkness spell. This one's actually very strong. It kind of reminds me of the Shadow Sorcerer feature. But either way, you learn the Darkness spell and is added to your spell list if it isn't already there. You can cast the spell without expending a spell slot, and you can't do so again until you finish a long rest. When you cast the spell in this way, you can see normally through the darkness that is created, and when a creature you can see starts its turn in the darkness, you can deal 2d10 psychic damage to that creature. You can also cast the spell normally, blah, blah, blah. So essentially, once per long rest, you can cast darkness without expending a spell slot. You can see through the darkness, and any creature that starts its turn there can be dealt 2d10 psychic damage. So you don't have to deal it if it is your ally, but any enemy that starts their turn there takes 2d10 psychic damage. So in a tight room, this is just completely blinding every enemy in the room except yourself and dealing damage to them. And that's not to mention, obviously, the benefits of attacking blinded creatures. So this one's pretty powerful, and the fact that it doesn't take any additional action economy to deal the psychic damage, to me, really makes this a very potent 6+ level feature. At level 10+, you gain Infusion of Eloquence. When you cast a spell that deals damage, you can invoke additional words of power to change the spell's damage type to your choice of Psychic or Radiant. That alone is a pretty dang powerful ability. Psychic and Radiant damage are so uncommon when it comes to damage resistances. Unless you're fighting some celestials or something, you're not going to run into anything that's resistant to radiant damage, and I can't even think of creatures off the top of my head that are resistant to psychic damage. So that's already pretty powerful. Any creature damaged by the spell takes additional damage equal to your proficiency bonus and has its emotions swayed with despair or adoration based on the damage type dealt. So if you deal psychic damage, they're frightened of you, and if you deal radiant damage, they're charmed by you, both until the start of your next turn. You can use this feature a number of times equal to your proficiency bonus and regain all expended uses when you finish a long rest. So obviously you can't just turn all of your spells into psychic or radiant damage, but you can turn a number equal to your proficiency bonus, which is pretty powerful, and then gaining the benefit of either frightening them or charming them is really, really nice. And keep in mind, there's no saving throw associated with this. I think they might add one if this is going to stick, if this does stay in this state. I would expect a saving throw to be added, but otherwise just automatically frightening or charming a creature could be very game-changing, actually. The 14+ feature is Word of Power. You gain the following options. Deadly Despair. When the target of your silvery barbs fails an attack roll, so that's this one, the really long one that's basically just giving a creature disadvantage. When the target of that fails an attack roll or an ability check or a saving throw because of the reroll, you can invoke a Word of Despair to give the target vulnerability to one damage type of your choice until the start of your next turn. This isn't going to benefit you because it only works at the start of your next turn, or until the start of your next turn, so it is mostly to benefit your team. That said, vulnerability to one damage type, you can just pick whatever damage type is most common in your party and make it that, and that creature will get absolutely melted. Selfless Invocation. When a creature you can see within 60 feet of you takes damage, you can invoke a Word of Power using your reaction to grant the creature resistance to that damage, and you take an amount of psychic damage equal to the damage that creature takes. So essentially, you can protect an ally. Whenever they take damage, you can give them resistance to that attack, and then you kind of split the damage between the two of you. Again, risky as a squishy caster. This is for bards, warlocks, and wizards. Obviously not particularly tanky by any means, but being able to protect your allies can be a huge boon. And the final one, this one is just for druids and warlocks, the Mage of Witherbloom. The first thing you get is that you get the cantrip Spare the Dying, and you gain both first level spells Cure Wounds and Inflict Wounds. You also gain a few more spells as you level up. Lesser Restoration, Ray of Enfeeblement, Revivify, Vampiric Touch, Blight, Greater Restoration, Anti-Life Shell, and Mass Cure Wounds. Obviously, all really great spells. These are kind of leaning into the clerical side of things, it seems like. So we're getting, it's cool that we're seeing this with Druid and Warlock, because now Druid and Warlock are starting to be able to take some kind of cleric magic-esque ideas, which I really love to see. The first feature of this is called Essence Tap. As a bonus action, you can draw on a reservoir of life essence to empower yourself for 1 minute or until you use this feature again. For the duration, you gain one of the following benefits of your choice. Overgrowth. When you choose this benefit, and as a bonus action on subsequent turns while the benefit lasts, you can expend and roll 1 hit die. You regain a number of hit points equal to the number rolled, plus your spellcasting ability modifier. Withering Strike. When you deal damage, you can change the damage type to necrotic and ignore resistances to necrotic damage. You can do this a number of times equal to your proficiency bonus and regain all expended uses when you finish a long rest. This one is really cool. Being able to use a bonus action to kind of enter another, state for a minute. You do have to choose between one of these each time you expend one of these uses, so you can't just jump between the two. But essentially, this one allows you to heal yourself up in combat, but not without paying. This kind of... If you use this feature a lot, you are losing a lot of value out of your short rests. However, with Withering Strike, you're just dealing more damage, and ignoring resistance to necrotic damage is really nice because there are a good number of creatures that are resistant to necrotic damage, so this could help you out there. The 6+ feature is Witherbloom Brew. This one is cool because you can kind of make some potions. This goes into kind of an alchemist idea. When you finish a long rest, you can use an herbalism kit and a pot or cauldron to create magical brews. You can create a number of brews equal to your proficiency bonus. Each brew requires its own flask. A brew retains its magical potency for 24 hours until it's used. For each brew, choose one of the following effects. So you can make a number of these equal to your proficiency bonus, and they will stay good, I guess, for 24 hours. You can make a fortifying brew. Choose a damage type from the following list: cold, fire, necrotic, poison, or radiant. A creature can drink this or administer it to another creature as an action, and they gain resistance to that chosen damage type for 1 hour. Pretty straightforward. Quickening brew. A creature can drink this or administer it to another creature as an action. The recipient gains 2d6 hit points and 1 disease or condition from the following list afflicting the recipient ends: charmed, frightened, paralyzed, poisoned, or stunned. That one's really, really nice. Being able to end conditions and regain hit points can be a game changer in a fight. And the Toxifying Brew, as an action, you can apply this to a simple or martial weapon. This is essentially a poison you can put on your weapon. The next time that weapon or ammunition fired hits a creature within an hour, the target takes 2d6 poison damage and must succeed on a con save or be poisoned for 1 minute. So yeah, pretty straightforward, deals damage, potentially poisons them. That one's not super potent to me compared to these other two. I would definitely be mostly using the Fortifying or Quickening Brew, but obviously causing a creature to be poisoned for a minute can be pretty nice depending on what kind of combat you're trying to play out. The 10+ feature is the Witherbloom Adept. Your connection to the flow of life force deepens. Once per turn, when you deal necrotic damage or restore hit points using a spell, one target of the spell takes additional damage or regains additional hit points equal to your proficiency bonus. So basically, you can either deal more damage or heal more damage every turn. There's no limit to how many times you can do this. This just happens every time, or once per turn when you do it. No complaints there, just passive bonuses, passive buffs, really nice. And the final feature of the Witherbloom is Withering Vortex. When you cast a spell using a spell slot that deals necrotic damage to any number of creatures that aren't undead or constructs, choose one of the creatures that took damage. You drain an amount of life energy equal to half the damage dealt to the chosen creature. One creature other than yourself that you can see within 30 feet of you regains a number of hit points equal to the life energy drained. You can do this a number of times equal to your proficiency bonus. So essentially, anytime you deal necrotic damage with a spell, you can heal an ally for half of the damage dealt. And my mind is immediately going to Finger of Death. There are certain necrotic spells that will deal a pretty significant amount of damage, and being able to heal an ally for that amount could be pretty huge. But it is limited, obviously, to a number of times between your long rests, so it's not like you're just going to be constantly healing your allies up with this ability. So all in all, this is fun. I think I like this a lot. I am not entirely sure if this method of creating archetypes will stick around, but it does make it kind of easier to write archetypes in this manner. Obviously, you can't get as specific with it, but I kind of like this method of creation because it allows one archetype to kind of be spread across multiple classes. You could have a Lorehold, let's see, you could have a Lorehold Bard and a Lorehold Wizard in the same party, and they would play completely differently because they're not the same class. If they stick to this, then we're going to be getting a lot more archetypes, because essentially, by creating this one archetype, the Mage of Lorehold, you have created 3 archetypes, because you can play it as a bard or a wizard or as a warlock. So there's multiple options here, but this could also cause some weird balance things that aren't coming to mind right now. I'm not seeing any issues right away, other than the one thing that I mentioned earlier of potentially causing pretty significant power spikes for certain classes, just because it's based on the level, not when that class would normally get an archetype feature. So yeah, I'm not entirely sure what kind of balance issues this might cause off the top of my head. Let me know in the comments what you all think of this. Do you think it's viable? Do you think this is something that they should stick to in the future? Is this going to become the only way that archetypes are written, or are we still going to be getting plenty of, or is this kind of going to be the exception? Are we still going to be getting plenty of class unique archetypes, or will this kind of become the standard? I'm not entirely sure. I suspect this is going to be something that happens more often, but doesn't take the place of class unique archetypes by any means. That said, that is all for this video. So if you liked the review, consider liking the video and subscribing to the channel. But as always, thank you all very much for watching, and I'll see you around.